Yeah, good evening all. Welcome to PMIK chapter web meetings. So today our speaker is Mr. D. Srikanth. He is a chemical engineer by qualification with close to 3 decades of experience in chemicals, petrochemicals industry. He has distinct exposure in managing projects onshore as well as offshore. Mr. Srikanth has over the years made a mark for himself in EPC industry by his association with various licensing and EPC contracting organizations. His spectrum of managed projects programs for various distinguished Indian corporations include building block chemicals, fertilizers, oleochemicals, elastomers, polymers, as well as petro API bulk drugs. He has led and managed projects in MNCs, different MNCs, including Reliance Industries Limited, SAPAM, J.R. McDermott. His experience in implementing projects as contractor as well as owner is a key driver in his developing a niche in project management. His deep understanding of the different perspectives of project management, the various process and methodologies that help in monitoring and controlling all aspects, schedule, quality, cost, is evident from the large projects he has successfully completed. So I welcome Mr. Srikanth to share his knowledge in the project management. Yes.
Thank you, Kenny, and my season's greetings to all. And I would just like to start on a, let's say, lighter note to break the ice by saying that the bearded chap that you look at on your screens is the same chap that you saw on the photograph that was published when you were invited. So it's the same person, except that that photograph was probably taken when I was a child, you know. So, so that's the difference. Otherwise, it's the same Srikanth that you're looking at, and it's the same person. So with that, I will quickly move to the proceedings for the day, and I will also stop video for the time that we go through the presentation to enhance bandwidth and audio qualities. I hope this is okay with everybody. Pardon me if there are any interruptions due to certain internet requirements. So here we go. So thank you, Kenny, once again, and my season's greetings and good wishes to everyone who's on this webinar at this time. My sincere thanks to the PMI Kerala chapter for the opportunity and also providing this wonderful and energetic forum to share knowledge and experience. I would also like to thank the participants for taking their time out late evening on a weekday as we get closer to the festivities of Diwali. So, what will we talk about today? Just a moment, please. A bit of a hitch, as I said. So if something can go wrong, it will. So here we are. So what's the agenda of the session? We will talk about, we will look at the technical definition of a project. We will look at the various elements of a project. Obviously, the ones that we're all aware of: scope, time, cost, quality, and risk. We will look at execution methodologies, and we will look at the success factors. We will also try and look at the technical definition of a project, and then we will try and bring about our own definition of the project at the end. We will try and draw parallels between actual life and the things that we do on a project, the differentiators that make a project happen on time, why things get done because of the various factors and reasons that make things happen, and why delays. Of course, as I said, we will address the fundamental elements of scope, quality, time, cost, and risk. So, what is the technical definition of a project? A project is a finite endeavor that has specific start and completion timelines, which is undertaken to create a unique product or service, which brings about beneficial change or added value. Now, there are quite a few things that we are talking about here, apart from the timelines and the start and closure stuff that we are referring to. We are talking about a unique product, we are talking about services, we are talking about bringing about beneficial change or added value. So, multiple things there. So, everything that we do, or let's say all the life changing decisions that we all take, involves project management. Let's take, for example, the simple act of building a house, writing a thesis for your Masters of Engineering, or the complicated stuff like putting up a factory. Each and every one of these things is project management. It involves project management, getting things done, and reaching our end goals. Let's take, for example, the simple act of building a house, our own house, in wherever location we want. It starts with looking out for a plot of land, finding the right plot of land, getting the necessary statutory permissions and approvals, zeroing in on a layout, deciding whether we want it to be single-storied or multi-storied, and then going on to engage an architect, an interior designer, contractor, carpenter, whoever we need, so on and so forth, to execute and implement the ideas and the vision that we have as far as our own houses. The same thing applies when we translate it to putting up a factory or even for an engineering. We can correlate all the aspects that we spoke about on the definition to every single thing that we do. So, why do we need project management at all? What will happen if it is not there? How do things get done? How do things get done seamlessly? So, the idea is akin to the image that we see on your screens, where we can really understand what the real customer really explained, how the project personnel understood it, and how it was designed and programmed and executed and documented. What the customer really needed was a very simple tire swing, and what he got was something which was totally different than what he wanted. Moreover, there was no documentation, there was no operations, and so on and so forth. So, if we look at the aspects of hello, yeah. All right. So, if we look at the aspects of engineering, procurement, and then project management control that are prevalent, and it is similar, or it is something that we can compare to an orchestra with a conductor or without a conductor. Let us assume that we have an orchestra which is playing without a conductor, then left to themselves, each and every one of the musicians is going to be ending up playing a different tune, and we may hear not music but cacophony. So it's not just an example that we have in front of us for project management, but it is also something that we can correlate to the need for communication, coordination, seamless actions and interactions to meet end objectives. I have a problem with the slide movement, so bear with me, please. give me a moment as I try and get the sharing stuff back. Yeah, there we go. And I am truly sorry for that. So why do we need project management as we were talking about? Project management enhances the probability of project success. It focuses on various elements and it converts ideas into deliverables in a very methodical manner. Obviously, it also helps us to achieve financial efficiency, cost, and project periods, quality, safety, and so on and so forth, and also create reusable data. But the most important thing is the discipline that the process inculcates in the people who are involved in the project and the support systems or resources that we set or build as we go about the process of project building or project management. So project management is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities to meet project requirements. It makes us think through very carefully about what we accomplish, how we want to get things done, and makes us choreograph the whole thing, laying out all the little steps and making them work seamlessly. It makes us think about the what, where, when, why, how, who does what, and the ways and measures to tackle uncertainties. It makes us think through the whole process, address the probable consequences. It makes us strategize, and in the process of strategizing, it makes us work towards accomplishing the outlined ideas or methods that we have put in our strategies. We can also call these strategies and methods as mitigation measures, which then later translate into risk management upfront. When we build our strategies, when we build our thoughts, we're also trying to do some amount of risk management and trying to think through whatever we want to do. So, what all does project management involve? Project management involves almost everything that we can think of. It almost involves everything under the sun, I would say. It involves planning, it involves budgeting, it involves coordination, team building, managing, coordinating, inspiring, execution, issue resolution, and integrating day-to-day activities with the larger scope of things in the larger picture, and then control, monitor, and then keep the changes within ours. So it's not just about managing. A project manager is not just about managing. It is about inspiring, motivating, and able to control the objectives of the project without being very overbearing on the whole team. So what are the skill sets that we need to do project management? I'm sure most of us know, but yes, as we can see in the small slide image that goes on, it's something that we all juggle. We all juggle a lot of multiple skills, and at times we juggle with superhuman skills. A project manager is expected to be a superman with superhuman skills, where he has to have the skills of management, he has to have leadership skills, he is supposed to be having vision, he is supposed to strategize, he is supposed to provide direction, he is supposed to align every single person who is on the project to meet the overall perspective and the goals, overcome barriers, address conflicts, resolve them, decide, and continue to run the project. But the most important of all these that I think, in my own experience, is communication skills. Communication is not just about writing or written or oral communication. It is a larger kind of thing where one has to be able to listen, speak, present as I am trying to right now. And not only that, but in larger projects, manage media relations. So communication is not just about speaking, it's about what the other person has understood and whether we have managed to reach the other person to make sure that he has understood our perspective. So to quickly look at what a project life cycle would look like, um, let's say we try and divide it into four large stages. And these kind of stages that we're talking about are, let's say, more applicable to petrochemical projects. Not that they cannot be applied to each and every project that happens in the world. They can definitely be, but they will always go through all these stages, which is the first stage of taking out the feasibility and looking at the environmental impact assessments that affect the project. Um Once you have the go or no go decision, then you move on to come up with your major contracts, whether you decide to do the project in a let's say a lump sum turnkey EPC manner, or you decide to split it up into parts and pieces and try and manage them yourself. And then you go on to the execution mode in stage three, where you get into the engineering, procurement, manufacturing, and delivery, and then the construction phase of the project, which will involve bulk liquidation, systems completion, and finally reaching the point where we are ready to start up and roll out with the product by cutting in with the feed. So in a very generic manner, this kind of portrays a beautiful S curve, which is projected in terms of time versus percentage of progress. Moving forward, while it is rather subjective to be classifying projects in different types and trying to put them into different buckets of mega or major or minor or whatever we want to call them, every project is dependent on the classification is going to depend just on the value and the type of work that is involved, not only the kind of man hours that we are going to expend in getting a project executed or completed, but also on the location, the complexity, and whether it is going to be spread across various locations or it's a single location and so on and so forth. As I said, it's a subjective kind of thing. It depends on how one qualifies. But a recent example of a mega project in very recent times would be the Atal Tunnel that was completed. And to look at the specifics, the length of the tunnel is just about 10 kilometers, but it is the longest tunnel built at a height which is about 10,000 feet in the world. There is no other tunnel which is at this kind of a height. Moreover, the beneficial change that it brings is in terms of the time it uses in travel. So this is one, kind of example. There are various other examples that I can cite from my own work experience in terms of the projects that Reliance does, and each and every one of them is either in a mega or major bracket, and they span at times continents. In my own experience, we have done projects which span continents where we have established virtual pipelines of supply and feed and so on. So that's as far as categorization is concerned. But as we go forward, once we get into the discipline kind of thing that we spoke about at the earlier stages, when I was talking about the kind of discipline it inculcates, how does it do that? How does project management help us to do that? It helps us by allowing us to manage the scope. So we will now get into the nitty-gritties of the management of a project by looking at scope, time, cost, and quality as we go forward. So how does project management help in scope management? While I define a scope, I put together what I wish to do and how I wish to do it. A work breakdown structure in a top-down logical structuring methodology defines and displays all the work that one has performed and that has to be done to accomplish project objectives. It provides a framework. It provides a larger organizing and managing structure, and it helps everyone ensure that all the work that we do on the project is defined and it is clearly identified. So we can correlate it to the discipline that we spoke about and the support systems that we set as we go forward, because this helps to also control and help us with the asset capitalization at the end of the project. Time management, one of the most critical parts, because every time we talk about a project, we talk about not just how things are done, but how they are done and how much time it takes. So time management is achieved by planning, by defining the activities, putting them in a logical sequence, and identifying the interdependencies, and then scheduling them to make sure that a lot of things happen in parallel and not in sequence. Projects, in my view, get done on time only when the team is empowered to decide and move very swiftly. The second reason I believe for timely completion is resources and financial strength that is available. The third for projects being done on time is the level of involvement or commitment by the owners or the people who are setting up the project. So even if one fails or has problems and is faced with problems along the length of the project, it is necessary to at times fail a bit quickly and then learn from that failure, get up and start running, and not just start running, but start course correcting as we start getting back to where we want to be. So as we move from time, while time is always money, so it flows into cost management from time. Cost management involves, again, quite a few aspects. There are various facets to cost, which involves the part of estimation, budgeting, control, and project finance, which involves financing by getting project loans or by various other methodologies, project insurance, and so on and so forth. While all these facets of cost are equally critical, the most important one is the ROCE. Why do we establish or why do we build a project? Why do we build a plant or whatever that we build? It's simply because we need a return on the capital that is employed. And it is all these elements help us to achieve that return on the capital that we employ. And that is the intent and idea of cost management in the overall perspective. Estimations and budgeting help us, and the estimates are converted into budgets, and then budgets are controlled. But mind you, a budget is not necessarily a license to spend all the money that has been budgeted and provided. It is more of a target that one is supposed to live with. If I have a budget of, let's say, million rupees to buy a car, it does not necessarily mean that I will try and find a model that is going to be costing me that kind of number. I will probably try and live within it unless I have means to overrun my budget. Again, that is going to be again weighed with the kind of return on the capital that I'm going to get in terms of that I'm going to employ and the return that I'm going to get. Contractors generally maximize their profits by being very cautious and prudent in the process of cost control, and thus they mostly convert their risks and margin monies into profits on projects. Contractors at times have a larger difficulty in terms of maintaining their cash flows and making the project finance itself and not dependent on external sources. Moving on, having discussed time and scope, time and cost, we will now dwell on quality. One needs to have a quality plan in place, which can and will be used to establish assurance methodologies. And then these assurance methodologies talk about procedures, methods, standards, and codes, which are all going to provide the necessary assurance that we talk about. And that is how we achieve the necessary control that we talk about in terms of quality. Of course, quality is not limited to goods only. It also extends to various services that one avails. Services can be engineering, fabrication, inspection, logistics, construction, plus each and every time we talk about the kind of beneficial change that all these aspects bring, we can easily go back to the definition and we can kind of understand that only by implementing very strong and stringent quality measures can we build things that will stand the test of time. If we build something that has compromised quality, we will probably face issues like the bridges that tend to at times cave in or have other problems. So when it comes to very large projects and very large public sector projects, the need for quality pretty much goes up, and the bar is pretty high. So quality is pretty much critical for the overall success of a project. A very simple and but very clear depiction of the execution methodology that one goes through as we run a project. We move from initiation to planning and design, and then we go on to execute. As we execute, we monitor and control, and all these stages keep interacting with each other. When we talk of planning, design, execution, monitoring, and control, they're all in some sort of equilibrium as they continue through the course of the project, and then we reach the closeout and the end of the project. What kind of steps do we see in execution? It's a never-ending ladder which keeps going up and up and up, and till we reach the objectives that we have set for ourselves. So we start with pre-project activities, and if we try and correlate that to the idea of putting up a factory, then we will all realize that it starts with getting the necessary statutory clearances, the environmental impact assessments that we need to do, going through, making sure that the land is clean and clear and the parcel of land is ready for going forward, and then trying to get it in the place which is closer to the transport facilities that are required, whether it is closer to a port or whether it is closer to other facilities where you need utilities or electricity and so on and so on. All that has to be thought about in the preliminary planning phase. Move on into a technology and basic engineering phase. And at this point, I would like to once again remind all my participants and viewers that this is kind of more closer to what we do with chemical or a petrochemical plant or a refinery or downstream oil and gas complex that we build. So it will involve obviously technology selection, identifying the right kind of technology for the product or the product mix that we have, basic engineering, identifying licensors, and then trying to put in EPCC model, engineering, procurement, construction, commissioning, and stabilization and support. So as we get into the depths of the model further and we talk about the EP and the C aspects of the project, now engineering management by itself is a very vast subject, and we can probably spend hours on only engineering management as a topic, but that is something that we will reserve probably for another day. But similar parallels that we can draw in terms of why we need to manage engineering, why it needs to be seamless and coordinated properly. Let's go back to the example of the house that we are trying to build, or the tire swing that the customer wanted. Now, if we correlate it to the house project, then let us assume that you are building a house which is multi-storied, and pardon me, I mean no offense to on the seminar, but let's say your better half wants a kitchen with all modern amenities, and you end up with a very simple gas stove, and you do not have the necessary hobs and all the chimneys and all the stuff that you want. Now, all these have to be engineered. They have to be thought of upfront. They have to be considered in the plan and the layout, and they have to be put in place in such a way that it can all fit into the whole scheme of things. So various aspects of engineering need to be addressed, whether it is value engineering, whether it is optimization of each and every item that goes into the process of building the whole project, the optimization, the quantity management, which also leads to cost reduction and in a way to control. So that kind of touches on various aspects of engineering, which we have kind of written down here. But obviously, engineering interfaces with each and every aspect, that is construction, manufacturing, delivery, and ultimately the commissioning of a product. Procurement. Procurement is one of the most difficult and at times, let's say, the important aspect of a project, because it contributes and constitutes a very large percentage, almost 50+%. Now, there is a need to have a very good understanding of the market conditions. There is a need to understand the suppliers who are available. There is a need to make sure that we do not put all our eggs in one basket and get into trouble. More so in the recent times, because there are instances when vendors and suppliers have got into situations of monetary trouble or bankruptcy, and they have been forced to close or shut shop and not being able to complete their orders or finish products. So there is a need to be very cautious. There is a need to be aware of the market conditions and the way the suppliers perform, the way they meet the delivery timelines, the quality standards that we need to make the project a success. And well, it also goes on to say a weak market condition at times can provide better opportunities uh, for the owner in terms of the items that we want to procure, as opposed to a competitive market. Goes to say, or to expand on that, it means that suppliers are fairly possibly free and not so much overbooked. While we talk about procurement, and we also talk about logistics management. While it's just two words on the slide, logistics management is such a large and such a vast subject. It's not just about transport. It kind of covers uh, so many ideas in terms of what we do in the onshore or the offshore industry, how we strategize to make the whole thing in terms of um, uh, putting things together, how we uh, make the whole stuff, in terms of how we get everything moving in the right direction. Moving on from construction and talking about the element of planning that is involved in construction. Um, it's one of the most crucial elements. While we talk of schedule and reporting, and it is designed to test the duration of each activity and so on and so forth. Those are all textbook kind of statements where we try and put the activities that we do into words. But when we talk about uh, construction and planning and staying with the methodology of construction work packages, helps to put together the right kind of mix and make sure that the construction is done according to what has been engineered. These kind of construction work packages are deployed very heavily in the offshore industry, where this philosophy of putting together work packages in the engineering stages itself helps to make sure that we don't run into trouble when we are trying to put the platforms in the middle of the Arabian waters, or wherever we are, whether it is the North Sea or the Arabian waters or whichever place we are. While we talk of work packages, there is also the need to account for the regional requirements of construction. When I talk about regional requirements, I specifically mean the seasonal or weather-driven requirements that are going to be applicable. Uh, for example, if we are building a plant or a project in Southeast Asia, or for that matter, even in Kerala, there is a need to clearly take into consideration the rains that are going to be prevalent. It may rain for 3 to 4 months in Mumbai. It may rain more in Kerala once during the July, August, and then again probably in November. But if you go to the southeast part of the world, it ends up raining for almost 6 months. So one has to account for those kind of seasonal requirements, seasonal vagaries that are going to happen, and we need to make sure that the construction plan and the schedule that we talk about addresses these kind of possibilities. This also applies very deeply to the offshore industry, as weather downtime is very critical, and there is the possibility of shamal coming up all of a sudden in the middle of the desert, or rough weather cropping up on the sea. And so weather downtime is something that is highly critical when we are working in the offshore area, specifically of oil and gas, whether it is building a subsea pipeline or deep sea cables, or installing platforms on different locations with wellheads. While we can talk about quantity monitoring and control and so on and so forth, the intent of whatever we are trying to say here is that we need to follow an engineer to construct philosophy and not the other way around. You know, if at all construction starts driving engineering, then you will only be ending up changing the drawings to make as built. You will not really be uh, going on with the way we engineered the project, or the way we thought about it in terms of the sequence in which it will be built. That is where the seamless coordination that is required between engineering comes in, where the construction manager decides upfront how he is going to build his unit or plant or whatever, whether it is going to be built from the north to the south, or from the east to the west, or whichever way, so that the engineering follows that sequence and tries to produce documents and deliverables which will meet the requirements of the construction manager. Apart from talking about engineering, there is also the need to plan the necessary infrastructure, the plant and machinery that we need, the kind of cranes, the kind of capacities of those cranes, whether it is offshore or onshore. Capacities of cranes are very critical and important. When we get into the offshore industry, there is a need to also worry about the availability of barges to such installations. And bear in mind that in all these cases, we're still trying to be very proactive by ensuring that the man hours that we spend on each and every activity is monitored and controlled and kept on a very tight leash, and make sure that the productivity is very high. So from having spoken about engineering, procurement, and construction, and all the various aspects of scope, time, quality, cost, and risk, we now come to the very idea and objective of project management and control. While it is very easy to talk about project management, the very reason why projects get done are because there is this invisible guy called the project manager who is making sure that everything is done in as seamless a manner as possible. While the team is obviously responsible, it is the project manager who has the responsibility, and who also has the responsibility to make sure that the others' roles and responsibilities are defined properly and they are met as we go on with the various stages of the project. Control, in terms of the function that is part of project management, project control, it ensures involvement of the owner's team in the process of control, where we get a proper buy-in to meet the timelines, the relevant information that is required, or the basis on which the whole program is built or devised is properly understood by both sides, by the contracting side or the owner side, or all the stakeholders that are available on a project. Monitoring and then controlling by mitigation or course correction is all part of the control. Resource allocation and deployment suit the timelines is also a support provided by the controls. So effectively, the controls teams or the controls personnel remain the eyes and ears of the I do see some questions popping up. I will take those questions at the end of what we are going through. No worries on those. We will try and address them. So as I was saying, controls remain the eyes and ears of project manager or the program manager to bring problems and possible delays to the forefront and make sure that they are addressed suitably. There are various tools available nowadays for control. We have software. We have Primavera, which is one of the leading software. We have MS Projects. And in the more recent software terms, we also have Agile, Sprint, etc. While we do have the project manager to keep bridging about on the interface management has emerged as one of the most critical factors on the success or failure of a project. While it is very easy to define interface management and say that it is necessary to reduce all interface related issues and risks by facilitating communication coordination among diverse people, parties, etc. It is necessary to understand that the sooner we identify all the connected parts of a project or the interfaces and make sure that they all fall in place as part of the overall puzzle, the lesser the chances of losing time, and obviously if we lose time, we lose money. So if we identify the various cogs in the wheel and make them spin properly, we will have a very precise timepiece. And this is something that I have always seen in various projects, while it is very easy to say, but very difficult to manage. But that's exactly the role of project management, control, and also interface management. While we have addressed risk as we have been talking about project management in a couple of areas, but now talking very specifically about risk management, it is best described as identifying and acknowledging threats and opportunities. Like we do a SWOT analysis on anything that we go about in terms of whatever big life-changing decisions that we take, we identify the weaknesses, we identify the threats, and we try and put in place mitigation measures. So while it involves, process by itself involves identifying, analyzing, and then mitigating or monitoring and controlling, the intent is to identify every probable risk by brainstorming with all the stakeholders. But the trick is not just in identifying the threats or the risks, but also monitoring and mitigating them. We can have a long list of threats and risks and whatnot, but there have to be mitigation measures in place. They have to be monitored. They have to be constantly reviewed and checked and made sure that they are liquidated or diluted, and that risk does not prevail. Risk is very dynamic. It keeps changing across the life cycle and the lifespan of a project. Risk can be internal. Risk can arise from internal factors or external factors to the project or the organization. Risk can arise from natural calamities or environmental aspects. And in the current times, there is no session on risk that can be complete without a reference to the current COVID-19 scenario or situation. The lessons that we have all learned due to the current pandemic situation is, uh, is pretty huge and large, and we have all learned to manage and mitigate so many activities and so many things. We have learned to manage things by working from home. We have learned to manage things by not being on project sites, but still being able to manage remotely by making sure that we have mitigation measures and quick responses to counter every single problem that making sure that the COVID tests are done in time, or the people affected are quarantined and specific facilities are built, so on and so forth. These are all mitigation measures that have been forced on organizations to ensure that the current situation is addressed properly. Case in example or case in point, based on what I have heard, is whatever is being happening in one of the refineries in the north of India. So probably 8 to 10,000 people have been kept very safely during the course of building a huge petrochemical plant. And all credit goes to the owners for taking all care and making sure that every single person out there is treated equally and properly. So that now brings us to stakeholders and stakeholder management. Stakeholders are those who can positively or negatively impact the outcome of a project. External stakeholders are people who are not necessarily directly involved or likely to impact the project, but can influence and have some kind of effect on the project. Project stakeholder management involves identifying all the stakeholders, analyzing and understanding their expectations, and the impacts or influences they can have. Develop appropriate strategies to work with all the stakeholders, and make sure that each and every one of them is not necessarily absolutely satisfied, but at least we make sure that their expectations are met to whatever possibilities we can. Types of stakeholders, very interesting types that we have. There are types who are going to be unaware, not going to be really aware of the impact of the project, the potential impact. They're not going to be aware of the beneficial changes or the added value. There are going to be people who are going to resist the project. Let's say the example of the Sardar Sarovar project on the Narmada River. I'm sure everybody is aware of the Narmada Bachao Andolan, which was representing the stakeholders and the representatives who were land losers or affected by the way the river was going to flow or the direction of the river was going to be changed. So that is the resistant part of stakeholders, which has to be managed. The more time we take to manage resistant stakeholders, the more time we lose, and the project gets affected in the longer run. There are also the people who are supportive and fully involved, and they obviously help and lead the project to fruition. So, coming to the last parts of the this webinar, we will talk about closeout, why there is a need to close out, what it involves in terms of the kind of data and what all necessarily forms part of any closeout. Why does really one have to close out? Why can I not just wrap up and leave? A project is built, the product is out, every specification that was provided to me has been met, the job is over. And why does one necessarily have to make a dry kind of document called a closeout report? While the idea of closeout is at times very tough on the project team and it takes quite a bit of time, there is the need to understand the intent behind a closeout. A closeout is something that captures every singular or unique learning that we have on the project, and it takes away the learnings, the takeaways that we have built on each and every item that we have gone through, best practices that we have managed to learn, which has helped the team to perform in a seamless, well-coordinated manner. Moreover, there is the need to think that a similar project later, if bagged by a contractor or being re-implemented in some part of the world, and one can always utilize all these learnings and takeaways, and then one can gain the advantage of cost time. Again, we go back to the definition. The idea of beneficial change and added value that project management and interface management and so on and so forth that we bring. The very idea of how we bring in that beneficial change. Even closeout is part of that beneficial change because it is meant for clarity, it is meant for the future. So, what is it that makes a project a success? There are various factors. While project management is all about getting things done and how you're going to achieve that in how much time, successful projects don't just get done by themselves. They are masterpieces of planning, organizing, time management, management and coordination and control. They are carefully choreographed with one step leading seamlessly to the next, where every possible hitch has been considered and counted, has been thought of and addressed, where every possible scenario has been visualized, and then that is drilled down through the well-managed team who have a very clear set of roles and responsibilities. And all this, mind you, is done without compromising on time, cost, or quality. So project management is obviously a very wonderful thing, which is very easy to forget and at times very highly invisible. But just imagine how the world might look if project management is just not there, how the world might look without it. Even though project management is virtually invisible, but the project being done without the absence of problems and the prevention of failures is what makes a project a success. And when all these elements of time, schedule, cost, resources, all of them work smoothly together, we achieve seamless execution and success. But what is more important is also the customer acceptance and, of course, the satisfaction of the customer, which is the most important key to a project. If the customer is not satisfied, well, all our efforts are infructuous and probably in vain. I'll leave the video link to look at it later. We will not play this right now. I think this webinar may be available as I see that it is being recorded. So it may be available to the people. So we will wrap up and we will talk about our own definition of project, which I said we will try and put it together as we start. So let's look at it as a journey that inspires and motivates us to perform, explain, achieve. So in my own words, a project is a very exciting venture that one sets out on with a bunch of hopes, aspirations, and goals. Along the way, one encounters various new ideas and challenges that makes us think on our feet, act, and deliver. The whole idea is to be 3 steps ahead and be aware of pitfalls. Foresight, rather than hindsight, is what a project is all about. And every project manager is only as good as his or her last project. So that's about it. Thank you very much.
I see, and I think there are a few questions in the chat. We can just go through it.
Yeah, sure. Just give me a moment.
Yeah.
All right. There's a question on procurement review. Very nice question. And well, who is responsible? While we talk of documents review, procurement is not really the the kind of the buyer. I would say is not the one who is responsible to do the review of the documents. It is the engineering team which is in the background, which is supposed to be reviewing the documents and making sure that the specifications that were put out during the material requisition stage or the inquiry is clearly being followed and it is being adhered to. The only other aspect that procurement can play in terms of the vendor or the supply is the inspection portion, where they can ensure that the inspection and test procedures and protocols are followed to the hilt, and the item that is delivered is done right. We have another question from my friend Nilesh Morin. Do we need to have a different set of approach for EPC and EPCM project in terms of interface management? Well, in both cases, interface management is going to both, except that when you have EPCM, you're going to be only managing them, and you're not going to be completely authorized to take certain decisions on behalf of the owner unless you have been given the authority. Yeah. But otherwise, if you're doing it EPC all by yourself or as a contractor, well, it's your own call. Well, another question on how prevalent is agile methodology now in offshore construction management? Well, this is a question which I will probably have to go back and do a bit of study on. There are experiments which are happening. I mean, we are trying to use agile or sprint even in the very small that we undertake within the petrochemical industry, where we try and see if we can sprint through for a couple of weeks. How do turnarounds get done, and whether sprint can be applied to it? But those are more, I would say, experiments at this point in time, and not established methods. Well, same question again, so I'll skip agile on oil and gas. How does one establish transparency? Well, that is what management information systems are supposed to establish. The idea of transparency is to make sure that most of the people are aligned and they are aware. It is necessary to use the management information systems to spread out the information that is available to relevant stakeholders and make sure that they are all aligned. How to manage? Well, that's exactly what management information systems do. What is a level 3 schedule? Level 3 schedule. I mean, multiple levels. There are different definitions. We can even go to level 4, but level 3 schedule, I would say, brings into play all the activities that one would kind of see on a project or would kind of envisage on a project. Level 3 schedules at times on large projects can run in thousands of activities, and the thousands of activities have to be not just identified, but they have to be linked in terms of a sequence or in terms of logic, where you define predecessors and successors and so on and so forth. Critical chain management is a subject in itself, and critical chain management was something that was propounded by Eliyahu Goldratt, the Israeli scientist, at one point in time. And you will find a very good book on critical chain management. If you read the book, The Goal, you will find all the nuances of critical chain management outlined and elaborated. Maybe that's one takeaway for you. Find the book, The Goal. Excellent. So I suppose
Okay, Srikanth, very thank you for your wonderful presentation. It was a very informative session. Thank you all the attendees, participants. I have copied the PDF code in the chat. You can use it. Once again, Srikanth, thank you. It was wonderful hearing you.
Thank you all. Thank you very much for your time and patience, and thank you for listening to me and giving me the opportunity. Thank you.